Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Muslim Bitcoiner podcast. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Tarek Pacha. He's actually a friend of mine that I met on Bitcoin Twitter, and we've talked a lot online. And he's interested in Bitcoin, and he's also a urologist, and he's also the author of a children's book series about nutrition and health. It's called the website is called My Superhero Foods, and I'll have that link in the show notes. So Tariq, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me, Abdullah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Alaikum salam. So I guess let's first start talking about Bitcoin. I want to get kind of like, you've talked about this with me before, but like, how did you get started with your Bitcoin journey? Did you ever go through like a shitcoin phase, or did you go straight into Bitcoin?
We all go through the shitcoin phase, pardon the language. I don't know if it's, but we all go through the crap coin phase. I think it was interesting. I knew nothing about finance, and nothing about, I mean, knew a little bit about stocks, but being a doctor and going through medical school, we were so busy in the books. We didn't really know much about anything finance related. You know what I mean? It's like books. So interesting. I stumbled upon Ripple XRP in 2017. And my dad probably says this cool thing called Ripple, and I didn't even know what it was. You know, it's going to replace the banks. And okay, I was like, okay, that's kind of neat. And then I started looking into it, buy a little bit of it. And believe it or not, bought it around 19 cents, went to $3.84. So
Oh wow.
yeah, but I ended up selling it around $1.60, kind of as it was crashing back down. But this was in 2017, where Bitcoin went up to 20K towards the end of that bull market run. But yeah, so and then I started looking at Polkadot and Ethereum and all that, and it took me a second to get to Bitcoin. I looked at Bitcoin as kind of like a grandfather asset, boring for boomers, just kind of the idea that it's not going to make much gains, and kind of not an exciting thing. That the altcoins are saying 1,000, 10x, 100x. But we also didn't see all the ones that went to zero, as most of them do in a long enough period. So then I guess, like I said, at the point, so I definitely had the phase. And then I read the Bitcoin Standard. I mean, we all know Saifedean Ammous, that. And then I just started to understand what money is. And then also, too, which is kind of interesting, starting to understand what money is and what it's meant to do, and the problems, or what problems we face in today's issue, even how that ties into Islam and riba. That's interest. And of course, we all know the Islamic stance on interest and base economy. So all that kind of put together kind of started me down the rabbit hole, and everybody's rabbit hole. We could talk hours about each of our own rabbit holes. But as I've studied a lot of the books, of particularly Parker Lewis, and you got a lot of guys like of course Michael Saylor, and all the saying the bullish case Rick Point. Of course you were actually the first article I read from a perspective. I put it it was the Muslim case for Bitcoin, and I actually have a copy in my mushaf. It was a great article. I encourage all Muslim brothers to read it. It's still very valid and good. I don't know if you've updated it. It's a fantastic read.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very flattered. Actually, when I kind of had a similar path when I started learning about Bitcoin. I didn't actually have like a shitcoin phase, because as I've stated before, my older brother made sure that I stayed away from all of that. But I also read the Bitcoin Standard, and that's kind of how I got interested in it. And that's around the time when I made my Twitter account, I think it was in 2021. Your account on Twitter was one of the first ones I found, oddly enough, subhanallah. And yeah, from there, I started to notice that there were other Muslims that were interested in Bitcoin, but I noticed there wasn't really a lot of stuff written or talked about. And if it was, it was always talked about from a blockchain or crypto perspective, another thing that I like to complain about. But yeah, made you decide to get on Twitter and start hanging out at Bitcoin Twitter, or I guess it's Bitcoin X now, sorry.
Yeah, Bitcoin. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you in the sense that you're trying to save your energy, as Michael said, and that's what kind of money is. You're trying to save this energy in the best way, to please your God, please your God, and you're trying to save it, your hard work through time. And then you start understanding. I never knew or cared about inflation. I knew nothing about inflation. I knew nothing about money and its properties. And then you're like, wait a minute, so much like within 7 to 10 years, if you just put it put it under your mattress, within 7 to 10 years, it's 50% of it's gone. If you even in our the fiat dollars, which is the better of all the currencies. I mean, so that started to kind of play with me in this idea that now I'm working hard with all these bills to pay, and like how do I like best save my energy through space and time, and then like again reading through again the Bitcoin Standard and these types of things, and then I start like, okay, let me go on Twitter, and then I come across people like you within the Islamic or the Muslim perspective, and then we have these very interesting discussions about where does Bitcoin fit from an Islamic perspective, where does it fit in a American or an American Muslim perspective, or even for Muslims worldwide. It's been awesome to be able to have these conversations and discussions and meeting you and having with your Bitcoin Medlist and what you guys have been doing, what we've been trying to do, and just trying to get this message across. And again, it's a very important message.
Yeah, yeah. And I also kind of found that there was like this lack of dialogue, kind of talking about Bitcoin, not just from the Islamic perspective, but also kind of how that ties into economics and computer science and just like, the progression of money and technology. And I think, reading the Bitcoin Standard definitely kind of like set that groundwork for me. And, it's just, I think it's just really cool that, we kind of have this like little small community that's on like social media talking about this. And, that's one of the reasons why we started Bitcoin Medlist, was because we wanted to kind of talk to other Muslims about these ideas, because, there are some scholars that talk about this, but it just seems like that it's not really, they're not really diving deep into this. At least, I feel that way, and I'm sure you feel that way as well. But like, what's been your experience, I guess, talking to other Muslims about Bitcoin? Has it been generally positive, negative? What are some of the obstacles you encounter?
Find most of the Muslims I encounter, even intelligent one, or even like savvy Muslims, people in the stock market or in bonds or all kinds of options. They don't like Bitcoin for the most. I mean, I wouldn't say they don't like it. I mean, there's some that are clearly don't like it, but then there are a lot of indifferent Muslims. They're afraid of it. It's not real. It's not tangible. So to summarize it, kind of like the TLDR, is that I think there's just a profound ignorance, not just, of course, within the Muslims as well as the world in general, but particularly the Muslims. I mean, it's unbelievable. Oh, that's some fake money. That's internet money, or that's some fantasy thing. You can't do anything with it in the real world. It has no purchasing power. It's not real. And I think, again, I think it all boils down to, I would have said the same thing, until you understand what is money, what is economics, like what constitutes, why did gold become the most sound money? What is sound money? What is weak money? What's stock to flow? I know that sounds fancy, but it really isn't fancy, right? Like, for example, if I can increase the supply of something, the stock to flow is very it's very high. I'm sorry, very high. So understanding, like, in other words, it's not worth much. It can be devalued very quickly. So this idea that why is something worth something, and so it just gets you thinking along the pattern of what is money. I think that if you understand or start to think about the roles and functions, I think that really can set you up to understand the conceptual understanding of Bitcoin. And then there's that technical aspect, the computer science aspect, the cryptography and the electricity. Why do you need all that electricity? That's stupid. But the whole idea of proof of work, and that anything in life, you need to make it somewhat difficult to obtain, right? Because why not? I mean, like oxygen, the one thing we can't go without, we will die the fastest, is oxygen. Why do we not pay hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for oxygen? Because it's wildly available. It's not scarce. So that's kind of an understanding. It's not just that it's important; it's scarce. It's divisible. Is it fungible? Is it recognizable? These type of things that you just start to really kind of dive down that rabbit hole. It really opened complete new worlds. So yeah, I mean, we can, like I said, we talk hours upon hours, but it's just fascinating. I just think that there's
for sure. I mean, I think one of the neat things, I guess, going down like my own personal rabbit hole journey of going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I found that I've been reading and wanting to learn more about like the Islamic take on what economics is and how like kind of like that Islamic economic thought has kind of developed over the years. Like, well, what is even Islamic economics? And it's kind of weird because like you said, before you found Bitcoin, you don't really like explore these topics at all. And, like I would have never done that before. Like it wasn't until like I discovered Bitcoin that I started like reading, have this Twitter thread or whatever where like I add books that kind of talk about like money or banking or economics or finance from the Islamic perspective and kind of like how it loosely relates to Bitcoin, even though they don't talk about Bitcoin in general. But, it does make you kind of, like you said, it makes you question like what money is, what banking is. And there's also this other rabbit hole where you kind of start to question why riba is like so prohibited in Islam. But like once you start to learn about Bitcoin, some light bulbs go off and you're like, wait a minute, this riba thing is actually really serious. And, being able to look at it from like a Bitcoin or Austrian economic lens, you can kind of see like, oh, wow, this is definitely kind of interesting. And I don't see a lot of like Muslims or Islamic scholars talk about it. Do you see, I already know what the answer to this question is, but do you see Bitcoin as a way for Muslims to escape or fight riba, or like what aspect of Bitcoin makes it resistant to riba, in your opinion?
Yeah, and that again, that's the essence or the crux of this, the podcast or the Muslim case for Bitcoin. There is absolutely no other way that I can see that that takes away the interest, the debt, these instruments that have actually we've never really understood how destructive they are because we've kind of always lived in it. It's like a fish asking, like they're always in the water. So how's the water? They don't know because they've always been in that environment. They're always wet. So I think Bitcoin is, like you've just eloquently stated, has allowed us to say, oh, wait a minute. I see. Okay, when I go leverage, or when I loan myself something out, or if I do something that kind of is a little outside, well, I would say little, or depending on your opinion, if it's outside the folds of Islam, you see how things can be destroyed pretty quickly. It's just, I think the big thing is Bitcoin has allowed us to reassess all these things, like why, like you said, like why is interest bad? I mean, what's wrong with, here's a little money, and I'll give you $100, and in 3 months give you back $150. What's wrong with that? I mean, when you've kind of grown up in that, that's all you've seen, and that's all you never question it. And I think this paradigm, the Bitcoin, going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, allows us to kind of question that more and see that at the end of the day. So
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely something that I feel like it's not really explored that much, and I think it's definitely the way I will try to explain Bitcoin. And like, I first have to kind of talk about these other concepts related to money, related to fiat, related to economics before you can kind of start to get like why Bitcoin is significant. Yeah.
sure. I mean, the whole idea of fiat is, basically creation of money from thin air without any productivity. Again, the idea in Islam is that money shouldn't generate money, like, because there's no productivity there. So you have something very sound, like sound money, such as gold or Bitcoin, or we believe the soundest money is Bitcoin. Is that you're going to have to work. You're going to have to be a better dentist. You're going to be a better doctor. You got to be a better business, better, have better products, goods, and services, because you need to provide something of value for someone to part from the Bitcoin. If it's cheap money, you can just print women, it's just all over the place. You know what happens: hyperinflation and the devaluation of the currency and the corruption of society. You see zombie companies that
Yes.
don't do anything. But basically, what ends up happening is they end up with all this money from the government and just zombie industries. And you have rent seekers, you have financialization. And it's just a lot of people talking about money, but nothing's being done. So when that blows my mind. Like, you see, there's just so much of this financialization, this idea of, making money, not really doing anything. I think Bitcoin is going to demand that whole proposition to be reevaluated.
Yeah. I think this is something, that Alan Farrington talks about in his book Bitcoin is Venice. I think you've
Really,
you've, you've read it, yeah. And where he kind of talks about like under a Bitcoin standard, you don't have a class of people that makes money off of money.
right?
So what you're going to end up having is a sound money where that if you want to actually participate in the economy, then you will have to provide something of value and you'll have to kind of bear on that risk. You can't, like, Bitcoin doesn't allow for that dishonest risk transfer between like the banking class, I guess, versus like the other classes. So like you have kind of to me at least the way in Bitcoin is anti-riba is that you're less likely to lend out Bitcoin. You're more likely either to hold on to your Bitcoin so that because you expect it to be more valuable in the future, or you lend it out for a business where you expect that the profits are going to be greater than what would have happened if you just held on to it. But you bear the risk each way. Like you're not just transferring that risk to someone else where you're just getting a fixed yield where you're, like you said, you're making money off of money. And I think this is a really good proposition for Muslims that are trying to understand Bitcoin and also sound money in general. Like gold to an extent kind of achieves that same aim, but as we all know, with gold, it leads itself to centralization. And that's kind of how we got into the fiat system to begin with. So
100%. I mean, no, there's no doubt Bitcoin is superior to gold, in my opinion. You're going to have people that say, but definitely gold is more sound than the fiat, which you have eloquently stated. I think also what Bitcoin allows is it allows you to save your money for future optionality versus invest. Like I'm not an investor. I'm a doctor. Why do I read Apple quarterly reports and what is a good investment? And what ends up happening is it causes me to make brash or rush investments that can cause me to lose my money. I mean, I work hard and basically give it away to some slick guy who puts some fake charts up and shows you some fake yield or some fake promises. And I'm not, like I said, again, as a doctor, that's not my job. I don't sit all day reading charts and looking at financials or looking at, profit margin sheets, cash balances. I don't do that, nor do I want to do that. So it allows me to say, okay, look, I made some money. I want to store this money for future optionality or to help out my family or my kids or an orphanage or whatever. It's going to maintain its value. Or like you said, more than likely it's going to go up because we do believe Bitcoin will, as Michael said, up and to the right forever. And it's true. It's going to be up and to the right forever over a long enough time period. I have no doubts in my mind about that because the dollar is going to zero. So if the dollar is zero and you've got actually the stock to flow of Bitcoin is perfect, it's approaching an infinity because the flow of Bitcoin is getting less and less and less till 2140. There's no flow. So that's an high stock to flow. You can't have anything harder or sounder than that. It's impossible. Like gold, you could maybe mine more gold. Like as the gold price goes up, you're going to go get some more pickaxes and some machinery, and you're going to go and try to find a meteor. But what I'm trying to say is that it does it because that it's not going to get flooded on. There's only going to be 21 million. That it's going to hold its value. It's not going to be flooded or corrupted. It gives you that peace of mind. Hey, I can save this away, and I know it's going to keep its value over time, years. And space. If I want to move, I can move anywhere I want, and I can take my value with me. It's not in a building that can be confiscated, a bank account that can be frozen, or a tornado can, ruin your house or your property. You got property taxes. Government can seize your stuff. And this is something, if you can just, self-custody it, you've got your wealth with you. It's pretty liberating. If you think, especially all the groups that migrated from, like, say, for example, the Jews, when they migrated from Germany to the States, or any oppressed group that migrated from one place to another, the Palestinians, couldn't take their property with it. Mm-hmm. This is an option, the best option, to take your property with you. And if you can just remember your 12 words, or, very, very simple to move it through space and time. So it's really,
I think a lot of Muslims, people in general, kind of dismiss that savings aspect of it. And they kind of like, look, oh, you're saving money and you're not investing it. So like you're just hoarding money. But like actually stop and think about it. Like as a Muslim, you have to pay zakat on your wealth. But if you're saving more, necessarily means that you're actually paying more zakat. And this is exactly what happened with me. I mean, before like I found Bitcoin, I didn't bother saving. Like I may have had like I was investing like in index funds or something. I didn't even bother thinking about it. But now that I'm saving in Bitcoin, something weird is happening. I'm paying more in zakat. And like such a it's really hard for me to explain to certain Muslims when they kind of have this aversion to saving or hoarding money. I'm like, well, if you don't have saving money, then how do you pay zakat on that?
One additional point, and this is the beauty of Islam. When you start getting to a point where you've got so much Bitcoin, inshallah, may Allah bless you and bless you and all, inshallah, and everyone. when you notice that you're paying a boatload of money in zakat, it's time to move that money. Meaning, it encourages you to invest it. It encourages you to give it in charity. It encourages you to build a foundation, a trust, orphanage, whatever. So Islam really, if you really take it down to the nuts and bolts and you really understand it, it's mind blowing because we think we're smarter. Like, well, so what? Like, I have $1,000. I give it to somebody. I want $2,000 later. Well, what's the big deal? It's my time. And you start trying to rationalize, and it sounds good in your mind, but God says in the Quran that Allah is at war, and God and His Prophet are at war with people that consume riba, at war, in qital, and there is no other problem or sin, if you want to say sin, or wrongdoing that's associated with God's anger like that. And God even the word in Arabic, yamhaqullahu riba, like He yamhaq, money will be destroyed. It'll be like mahaqa, is like complete obliteration and destruction. You will have success. Again, success does not mean more dollars in your bank account. It could with charity, and actually zakat means to grow. So when
Yeah.
you give, your money is growing. It's paradoxical.
Yeah, I know, and it's kind of weird because like, we talk about the concept of time preference and, like planning for the future. Well, like here I am, I'm saving more than I spend. And now not only does it force me to like think in the future in this life, but it also forces me to think in the future in the next life. So like it just kind of has this weird compounding effect of like being able to have a sound money to save in. It's forcing me to like look ahead to the future of like my kids, my grandkids even, and like even also thinking about your akhirah. So like now you have this wealth, so like right now, like, one of the things that we did during last Ramadan is that we actually raised money for an orphanage in Uganda. And, like, it's weird because it just flies in the face of people that are like, oh, well, if you have like a fixed money supply, people are going to save and no one's going to spend. Well, like, no, that's not true. Like, we literally have proof right now where, there are Muslims that are saving their hard-earned wealth. They're saving it into Bitcoin, and then they're spending it, but they're not spending it on like stupid stuff. They're spending it on charity. They're spending it on sadaqah. They're spending it on their kids. They're like, wanting to make a future for themselves and their family. So like this is kind of like a neat aspect of Bitcoin that I feel like a lot of Muslims haven't really like conceptualized, at least out loud.
Time preference is critical to have a low time preference. Is in the idea of how Bitcoin alters our time preference. It's absolutely mind-boggling. But if we think about it, remember when we die, deeds are cut off except for three. The righteous offspring that makes prayers for you. The knowledge that you learn and you teach and people benefit, and the money. Whatever you do with money, like an orphanage or a hospital or library, mosque, whatever, masjid, whatever, these are ways for your akhirah. So when you say, okay, I've got this savings, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this. The whole idea of having this low time preference is instead of buying stupid stuff, like buying just whatever is excessive. We know God does not like the ones who are wasteful and excessive. So it teaches us that it's truly remarkable, and it just kind of blows my mind how like more as Muslims we haven't like really grasped onto it. I think we will, inshallah, but it's going to take some time and education. What you are doing, what we're trying to do, it's been phenomenal. Starts, grassroots level, 1 person, 5 people, 10 people. Muawiyah Tucker's doing a fantastic. There are many guys that are, mashallah, that are out there, but eventually, it will come. It's just a matter of time. I think there really is. I think it's self-evident.
Inshallah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, at least like in my Twitter echo chamber, I have noticed that there are like more Muslims that weren't initially into Bitcoin. They're kind of like starting to open up to this idea of like, oh, there's actually something in this Bitcoin thing that like actually might help the Ummah. There's actually something here that might help us like escape riba, and there's like something here like a necessary component, because every Muslim kind of has this general feeling that there's something wrong with the global Ummah. Like I don't think any Muslim thinks like everything is fine. Like everyone has their own opinion of what they think is wrong, but when it comes to like looking at riba and money, like you kind of like look at this thing that like, oh, this plugs this hole very nicely. This actually fixes the riba problem and all the downstream effects that we've like talked about earlier. And yeah, like you said, it starts at a grassroots level and it'll come with time, inshallah. We just need to keep I think we just need to keep making more noise and kind of living by example and using the tools that are out there, and also to a certain extent, like encouraging and even taking action ourselves to build tools that other people will use with how it interfaces with Bitcoin.
And one last point, all three major Abrahamic faiths despise interest. I mean, if you look in the Torah, the Torah, if you look at the Injil, and even in the Bible, the English Bible, when Jesus saw that they were dealing with usury or interest, so mad he threw the table. And
Yeah.
and then again, a very, very, and Jesus was known to be very turn the other cheek, very peaceful, non-violent. I mean, this type of violent move, turn or overthrow the table. So, I mean, it's fascinating. And even Jews among themselves, they don't practice interest, but they then kind of, then said, well, maybe it's okay if you're a non-Jew, we'll practice interest. But it's fascinating if you look at the history, and it's just, unfortunately, it's kind of like it's become so widespread. I remind myself and I remind everyone listening that the prophet, peace be upon him, he said there'll come a time where interest is so widespread that everyone will be involved in it, even because it will be involved. The dust of interest will hit all of us. Doesn't mean we don't try. Doesn't mean we don't try to get away from. Doesn't mean we don't pursue more sound money and anti-riba principles and talk about it. But it's become very challenging. We even have, like you see, Muslim blockchains, Islam chain or Muslim chain, and it's full of whatever. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about people, but the reality is there's all kind of scams, unfortunately, in both Islam, Christianity, Judaism, non-Muslim, atheists. They're all human is human.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you definitely make the case that, like, even just looking at it from the usury aspect, I think there's definitely a case that people from other faiths can look into Bitcoin and adhere to their faiths by adopting a sound money. And I think that's also, conversations that I've seen online as well. I want to pivot the discussion to talking about health, since you are a urologist, and I mentioned before you are an author of a children's book series. You can check it out, My Superhero Foods. I've actually bought one of the books for my children that are 5 years and younger, and especially my older kids. They really actually enjoy the book, and it's quite nice because these books kind of encourage not just the children, but also the parents to make better nutrition and health choices. And I think, that kind of goes hand in hand with the low time preference aspect that we were talking about. So can you just tell me how you started the idea of wanting to write a children's book series? Kind of what motivated that?
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's a good question. Well, my wife and I believe that we started together, the co-founders of mysuperherofoods.com. And the idea was, why do we wait till we're 30, 40, 50 to understand what good nutrition is or what wellness is? Why are we reading about the importance of sleep when we're 40, or the importance of whole, nutrient-dense, organic food? And how about movement and exercise, vitamin D and the sun, and grounding, walking barefoot outside? Why do we learn these things as we get older? We believe kids should be empowered. We believe that if we feed kids the best information that we know, and we provide them the opportunity to understand, they know more than you imagine. They understand more than you imagine. So we saw it within our own kids that, hey, if you eat more grass-fed meat, you're gonna build muscles. You're gonna run faster. You're gonna lift. You're gonna run faster. You're gonna lift. You're gonna lift more. Eat avocados for good fat and energy, and you'll jump. You'll have higher jumps. Eat more avocados, and we'll measure long jump. And what happens is you pair a food with a superpower and explain to them that food is the ultimate medicine. Like, good food is medicine. Bad food requires medicine. Food is medicine. Bad food requires medicine. So we want to explain, again, nutrition and nutrient-dense food, and the importance of staying away from certain artificial dyes, chemicals, natural flavors. I know that sounds good, but that's a whole nother topic we won't go into. Like yellow dye, yellow 5, red 5, all these that have been shown to increase hyperactivity and ADHD and attention issues, which doesn't allow our children to thrive. So if you want your children to thrive, how are they going to thrive when you give them a toaster strudel and a Pop-Tart and then you send them off to school. You know what's going to happen. Their glucose you spike it at first, but then insulin comes in, and then it crashes, and then you get all and you get headaches, and you can't focus, and then you get on this roller coaster of blood sugar crashes, and they can't focus. And then you say, well, you need to put them on Ritalin, you need to put them on drugs. And in reality, maybe some kids, consult your pediatrician, consult your doctors. Maybe some of your kids do need that. But if we can clean up the food, if we can establish good sleep habits and good sleep patterns, if we can reduce screens and get our kids more outside into nature, these type of things will give our kids the best chance to thrive at an early age. Why not now versus later? So that's kind of the idea. What spawned the whole company. We're kind of like a wellness company. The idea is kind of like a Disney for wellness is the idea. We want to be go-to for kids wellness. So we have all kind of free resources, books, children books, breakfast guides, all kind of resource guides that will help parents and children alike try to move towards, optimal wellness and health. Because you can't be your best, you can't self-actualize or be your best without hitting those basic things: sleep, stress, maintaining your stress, or reducing your stress, mindfulness techniques, sleep, food, connection, purposeful living, all these things really important in order to self-actualize and be the best you can be. So that's the idea. And my wife's is this kind of CEO. She does all the stuff and all currently all the resources. Very, very, very useful for kids and obviously parents and their parents. Very good.
I wanted to ask because that's really like the products, or I guess the mission that you guys are carrying out, because, I kind of see it even in my own life. Like I've recently had to kind of manage some of the Sunday school stuff at my local masjid. And, just like watching a lot of the kids come in and they're all have like all of this, they have like candy and stuff that their parents just give them. And it's just like all of this food coloring they have. And then, even when I'm talking with the board at the masjid, talking about like what kind of foods we should, like what foods that they provide for the children during break time. And it's just all this stuff, like all this garbage with like seed oils and like everything had freaking food coloring in it. It was just insane to deal with. And, it's kind of cool that like just by like buying one of your books, like I read it to my kids at night before bed, and it's like one of their favorite stories. Like they understand, like my superhero foods is like, that they understand, like you said, that a lot of the foods have kind of like superhero powers attached with them, and that's kind of like how they remember. So like my kid knows that like, grass-fed red meat is good, so he'll like eat a lot of it. He knows like avocados are good for him, and he'll eat those. He'll eat like, a lot of fruits and stuff, and he'll like avoid a lot of, like sugary stuff. So like he kind of like understands just from me reading that book. And I'm really glad that like, people like you and your wife are out there kind of like spreading that message. Alhamdulillah,
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Mashallah, like I said, at the end of the day, we're all kind of working together, and that's the beautiful low time preference and bringing it kind of all together: health and wellness, Bitcoin, Islam.
Yeah.
So, and there's already these. You can hear Balaji talking about the network state and talking about how eventually what's going to happen is we might migrate into a community that, for example, like the no sugar community. So, for example, in order to like live in this community, you can't get sugar. It's like whatever, no processed foods or like whatever. It's like people are tending to move into areas actually physically that they share similar characteristics. I mean, imagine, you're not going to do too well with the shitcoin community. Like, if you do a lot better in the Bitcoin maximalist, or, someone who believes in the ethics of Bitcoin, even if they're not the same faith, you'd be surprised at how much you have in common. It's fascinating. Like you said, Barrington's book is marvelous. He's a fantastic writer. I think I call him Shakespeare Bitcoin. His marvelous. Yeah. I mean, he's powerful. Parker Lewis. I mean, there's a bunch, like I said, a bunch of good guys that just do so much good work. But like you said, I think health and wellness is absolutely critical. And I think it starts with kids and empowering kids. And then with sleep, we have My Superhero Sleep. It's a great little story on teaching how to the power of sleep and how it recharges your battery, and what do you need to do before sleep, checklists, and make sure you have the temperature, cool, and why it's important to take a nice warm bath in the core temperature. Because if you take a bath, it kind of, makes the core temperature, and it'll cause your melatonin to be. So we go into all that stuff. It's not, it's not super sciencey, but it kind of, every little tip and trick that is in the story is science-based. I've already written a compendium. It's not published yet. All the science sleep book. So like, why do you need to get morning sun in the first 30 minutes before, when the sun's coming up, when that sun is 30 degrees or less, it resets your circadian rhythms. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, and it helps you sleep at night by getting 15 minutes of sunlight in the morning. I know that doesn't make sense, but it suppresses melatonin, it makes you feel awake, and it also resets it's the best resetter of your internal clock, known as the circadian rhythm. And there's just tons of stuff like that, and it's very, very important.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to probably get that book as well, because I think, like I said, your book has been very helpful for my children, because they actually, they listen when you actually read it to them, and they take a lot of the advice in there seriously. So, alhamdulillah.
Well, stay tuned. We have a third one coming out on mindset.
Wow.
Teaching
okay.
in growth mindsets.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. So, like for anyone listening, I highly recommend, at least for the My Superhero Foods book. Like I said, I'll have a link in the show notes about that. It's a wonderful book, especially if you have little ones. I think there's a lot of value in being able to communicate these ideas so that, your kids at least start to have good habits when they're younger, so that they're not like doing this stuff like when they're like 30, 40, or 50 years old. So,
we never have perfection. You're going to have some days when things are tough, and that's okay. It's at least, look, we're not perfect, and we're never, we don't want to ever shame anyone, and we're doing the best we can. And again, there's that Sunny Side Up, which is a book on how to 28 days of breakfasts, how to prepare them, what to buy, when to buy, how to prepare for the week, all under 10 minutes, all very nutrient dense food, very useful for busy parents. Nutrient dense food. What I have to do is I'll send you the books. We got, just when we get off, just send me your address, and I'll send you all our books. I know you have the children.
I'm gonna buy them off your website. So, so I guess I'm gonna conclude in a bit, but I kind of wanted to get your perspective. I know one of the things that you talk about on your Twitter is about men's health. So just as like a broad topic, at least just for me, I'm kind of asking this personally, like, what are some of the things that you think a lot of men today kind of have misconceptions about their health? Like, what are some of the things that men should focus on in terms of their health these days?
Again, it's extremely important. This could be a whole podcast on itself, but I'm going to talk about some of the main issues. I think number one and foremost, kind of, I get a lot of questions about testosterone. I get a lot of questions about, erectile dysfunction. I get questions regarding pornography. In general, I think the biggest problem men have, I would say number one is, I know this sounds crazy, but their lack of attention to sleep. If you sleep well, and I'm not talking, but people, I get 3 hours of sleep, or I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yes, recommend a great book if you want to read about the importance of sleep. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It is an compendium of everything you need to know about sleep. Fantastic read. So men not prioritizing and focusing on sleep, or minimizing. And it's absolutely critical for almost everything, for your testosterone levels, for your ability to lose weight if you're overweight, or your ability to not crave junk, to stay on a plan, willpower. It's all associated with lack of good sleep. It's fascinating. We're up on our phone, Twitter, we're on our computers, instead of going to bed at 9, 10 o'clock, we're going to bed at 12, 1 o'clock. And then, we get up early for work. We have to go to work. And that has humongous ramifications on your quality of your sleep, be it non-REM sleep, REM sleep, and growth hormone, testosterone. We can, that's a huge topic. So I'd say one is prioritize sleep. I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't, of course, make your fetch prayer. And, if you want to get up for tahajjud a little bit, go for it. That's a beautiful thing. I'm not saying don't do that. The second thing I would do is prioritize nutrient dense food, one ingredient as much as possible. And so nutrient dense, one ingredient, and stay away from processed food as much as possible. Like, that may include meal prepping, because when we're out, you don't have a choice. And sometimes I forget to prep my lunch, and I go to the hospital. I'm kind of jammed with, chips or something that's, again, we're not perfect, but at the end of the day, one ingredient, nutrient dense, meal prep, stay away from processed food. That's huge there. And then the third thing that's extremely critical for men, these are two things you can work on that don't require, much money, don't require medicine. And the third thing is getting into the gym. But work on building your body, because if you have a sound body, you have a sound mind. Nobody will take you serious if you don't have a sound body. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not saying being an Adonis and perfect six, but when you work out, when you have a physique, when you put, it's proof of work. It shows this person, okay, he may not be the best dentist or he may not be the best doctor, but you know what? He's got discipline. He's able to control, not, control a lot of things. And building your body is probably singularly the food and the sleep are absolutely, absolutely critical. And there's also the spiritual component, that we could go as more important. But I'm just saying from a materialistic, like, medical perspective, I would add so the body, and then I'd add purposeful living. And however we as Muslims, we know what our purpose is, to
Right.
worship one true God, and devote ourselves to Him. And believe in that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last messenger. That's clear for us. But whatever that purpose is for you, you got to have a purpose. Because if you don't know what you're getting up for, it's hard to sleep because you're so like, well, what, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to scroll. I don't care. I don't have anything to do. And you're going to eat crap, and then you're going to sleep. Then that is going to mess up your sleep, and sleep's going to make you eat like crap. And then you're going to be like feeling terrible. You're not going to work out. Then you're going to feel like a piece of junk. Then it's all a, so we call it so you have to get a wellness picture. And men's health, we can, again, there's specific topics like low testosterone and sexual dysfunction that we're seeing in younger and younger men. And we, real briefly, and I advise, if you're younger, it's really ravishing the Muslim world as well. It's pornography. Talk about a ton of different topics. If someone wants to, maybe several months from now, if someone wants to address one of these topics, hey, Abdullah, or have him back on for pornography-induced erectile dysfunction, we'd like to have a full discussion on that. Or, hey, let's talk about low testosterone, erectile dysfunction. Or, how do we exercise? What is the optimal exercise regimen for men? So what does it mean to exercise? What does it mean to eat nutrient-dense, one-ingredient whole food and stay away from processed? If you want to go into more of the details. But pornography is absolutely, it's an absolute destruction. I'm seeing it in my clinic. I'm seeing younger men between the ages of 20 and 30 not able to have erections, not able to have relationship with their wives
Wow.
because of an escalation of stimuli. It's a long story. The details we can talk about later, but it is definitely damaging not only to your sexual performance, it's also damaging to your relationship. And there's a lot to be said about that. But my advice is really, get off of the, get off of the porn. Really, there's no good in it. It does not help your sex life. It's, sometimes they recommend in sex therapy, well, having troubles, go, that's ridiculous. And even though they'll try to say, oh, no, it's okay. If you're watching it to get, no. Get off of that. It's not helpful for many, many reasons. So that's kind of a very, very overview of kind of some important topics. But any of those topics can be explored in a full 2-hour conversation for sure.
For sure. And I apologize for asking such a broad questions. I didn't really know like where to focus on, but definitely there was a lot that kind of resonated with me, especially when the first thing you said was about sleep and, being a parent that, so especially of younger children, that can be a very hard thing to prioritize. So I like kind of how like you're taking that wellness approach to kind of get the children to value their sleep so that when they get their sleep, the parents get sleep. And that's kind of like how, inshallah, like how I can start, managing other aspects of my life. Because I find that like, I've, since going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I've been eating a lot more red meat. I have not gone full 100% carnivore, but like I eat like steak and ground beef like every day. Like every single day, I make sure to eat that. And, I also try to work out. So, alhamdulillah, like I've been working out pretty regularly, but definitely the sleep is kind of like the thing that's really hard to get control of for me personally. So it's kind of cool that I wasn't expecting such a holistic answer from you, but you kind of like really encapsulated all the aspects of health and wellness, and it's all interconnected.
It's all interconnected. Well, that's a good summary. And saying, meat, no doubt, grass-fed, well-sourced meat is fantastic. Got tons and tons of nutrients as well as organ meats. We know this. The, carnivore, I don't think there's any harm in it. Personally, I think more of a Mediterranean-esque diet. I think there's nothing wrong with salad and tomatoes and cucumbers. And now, again, some people may disagree. If carnivore works for you, I'm not going to say, no, don't do that. Just my personal opinion, being vilified is absolutely incorrect. It's not bad. Bad is good fat is good for you. Like saturated fat on a ribeye is good if it's sourced from a good animal.
Mm.
Butter, if it's sourced from a good animal, is fantastic. Olive oil, tallow, these things, of course, we don't want seed oils, but any of these natural fats that are sourced from good animal products, absolutely full of nutrients, full of energy, full of blessing to be able to have that because it gives us that energy. And, a lot, back in the day, they didn't have as much access to all this meat. For us, we could just go and pick up some meat really easy.
Yeah.
And it had to be nutrient dense because they would go, obviously, they would intermittent fast because it wasn't always available.
Mm.
So, I mean, it did some intermittent fasting or better yet, fasting, Islamic fasting. That's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, Monday, Thursdays, he used to fast usually Monday and Thursdays, and then the 3 days, 12th, 13th, 14th of the full moon. Some interesting data there on human behavior and full moon. It's scientific studies actually, so that crime rates and or go up on the full moons on the days of the full moons. It's interesting. So long story short is that our guidance, we do believe it's the best guidance. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We eat a lot of meat as well. Nothing wrong with meat. Nothing wrong with meat. Your problem is the again, carbs are okay, the right carbs, right?
Right.
Like food, beans, not terrible. They're not terrible. I mean, but don't be so afraid of carbs. They have a place, and again, there's a lot to be said about what diet works for me versus you, Abdullah, versus my wife. Some people do very well with keto. There's some data that show that keto and menstrual cycle, women don't do that well when they're in keto in the menstrual day, so they cycle off during their period. It's fascinating. So I think the key is there's no one answer for all, but there are, I would say the one main thing you could say about diets is whole food, nutrient dense, one ingredient, like this few possible from the earth, what
right.
I mean? God, or, however you want to say that, I don't think you can debate that. Mediterranean, carnivore, paleo, keto, ketotarian, where there's so many different variants of them. But if you just keep in mind one ingredient, like beans. Okay, some people argue that, but at the end of the day, if you tolerate beans, I love raw milk. I think raw milk's fantastic.
Yeah, I've also been addicted to raw milk recently. It's it's really good stuff. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. Can you tell the audience where to find you online?
Yeah, I mean, mostly you can find me on Twitter at Tarek Pacha. Fairly active there. mysuperherofoods.com. That's probably and we have a small presence on Twitter, but a pretty large presence on Instagram, mysuperherofoods.com. The website's full of good resources, free ebooks, all kind of information galore. We have what's called My Superhero You 2020. Well, it was 2022, now it's 23. So you can actually, each month we say bye to something and hello to something. And you go throughout the year as a family trying to work. It's free, all free. And okay, for example, hello, healthy fats. So what are healthy fats? Where do you get them? What are health? I mean, what is a saturated fat? What's an unsaturated fat? What's a polyunsaturated fat? And it goes over these in really simplistic ways that we do the writing. And, that's a great source for anyone who wants wellness. And then other than that, that's the two main places.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. This has been great.